James was an ordinary man who lived a quiet life in the city. Every evening, after finishing his work, he walked through the narrow streets to feed the stray dogs. He never missed a night, no matter how tired he was. To him, the dogs were not just animals. They were friends who waited for him with hungry eyes and wagging tails. This little routine gave him a reason to smile, even when his own life felt empty. But one evening, something was different. The streets were too silent, the alleys too dark, and the usual dogs did not come running. James carried the bag of food in his hand, calling softly for them. "Come on, boys, I've got dinner," he whispered. Yet no bark, no whine, no paw steps reached his ears. A cold wind passed through the alley, making him shiver. James frowned, wondering if maybe the city workers had taken the dogs away. But then faintly he heard something. Not barking, not meowing, not even human crying. It was a strange sound, soft and trembling, like the voice of a lost child. It came from behind the broken fence at the far end of the alley. His heart began to beat faster. "Is someone there?" he called out, his voice shaking. The sound answered him with another cry. Higher this time, like pain mixed with fear. James dropped the food bag and pushed the fence open. On the other side was a hidden corner, a place he had never explored before. There, under the shadows of a ruined wall, two small figures crouched together. At first, James thought they were children, maybe abandoned by cruel parents. Their bodies were thin, their clothes torn, and their faces dirty. But when his eyes adjusted, he froze. These were not ordinary children. Their skin glowed faintly, like moonlight shining through glass, and their eyes were wide and bright, filled with stars instead of pupils. The strange marks on their arms moved like living light. Crawling in slow patterns, James gasped, stepping back. The two little figures clung to each other. Shaking, they were afraid of him just as much as he was afraid of them. For a moment, silence filled the air. Broken only by their weak breathing, James whispered, "What? What are you?" He did not expect an answer, but then one of them spoke in a soft, trembling voice. Not in English, not in any language he knew, but the word carried a weight. It sounded like protector. James felt a chill run down his spine. He had never seen anything like this in his life. These were not stray dogs, not even human children. They were something else, something from beyond this world. The realization hit him hard and his legs almost gave way. But then he looked again, really looked. Despite their strange, glowing skin and alien eyes, he saw fear, hunger, and sadness. He saw the same helpless look that the stray dogs always had when waiting for food. And in that moment, his fear softened, replaced by something stronger. Compassion. Slowly, James knelt down, showing his empty hands. "It's okay," he said gently, though he was not sure they understood. "I won't hurt you." The children looked at each other, then back at him. Their eyes shone brighter, as if testing if he was telling the truth. One of them stretched a trembling hand forward, glowing faintly in the night. James reached into his bag and pulled out a piece of bread. He placed it on the ground between them and stepped back. The smaller child sniffed it, touched it, but then shook their head. They did not eat. They only stared at him, whispering again in that strange voice. "Protector, protector." James's mind raced. Who were they? Where did they come from? Why were they here, hiding in the dirty streets of his city? And most of all, why did they look at him as if he was the only one who could save them? The night grew colder, and James knew he could not leave them there. If anyone else found them, it would not end well. They were too strange, too fragile, too different. He took a deep breath, forcing courage into his heart. "All right," he whispered, "come with me. I'll keep you safe." The children hesitated, but then slowly they stood up. Their small, glowing hands slipped into his. The moment their skin touched his, James felt a warmth, like starlight burning softly against his flesh. It was not painful, but it was not normal either. It felt like a bond, like a silent promise together. They walked out of the dark alley. The city lights flickered above. Cars passed and humans moved around, unaware of the secret that now followed James. No one saw the strange glow hidden under the children's ragged clothes. No one knew the universe had just entered his life. But James knew his life had changed forever. And deep inside he also knew this was only the beginning. James walked fast through the city streets. Keeping his head down, the two strange children followed close, holding his hands tightly, their glowing skin hidden under his old jacket. He tried not to look suspicious, but every shadow made him nervous. Every sound of footsteps behind him felt like danger. He had no plan, only one thought: take them home, keep them safe, at least for tonight. When they finally reached his small apartment, James unlocked the door quickly. He pushed them inside and closed the curtains. The children stood in the middle of the room, looking around with wide eyes. They touched the table, the couch, the lamp, as if they had never seen such things before. James sat down, breathing hard, his mind racing. What had he done? Why had he brought them here? The older child stepped closer, pointing at his chest. "Protector," the child whispered again. Their voice soft but clear. James shook his head. "I don't know what you mean," he said. But the way they looked at him, with trust, with hope, it made his heart heavy. He sighed, rubbed his face, and tried to think. He brought some food: bread, soup, and milk. The children sniffed the food but did not eat. Instead, the smaller one held his hand and showed glowing marks on their arm. The marks moved like living light, forming symbols he could not understand. It was not random, it was language. James stared in shock. "What are you trying to say?" he asked, but no answer came. Only the soft humming of their glowing skin. Suddenly, the older child touched the lamp and it flickered. The light bulb glowed brighter without electricity. James's eyes widened. You can control this?" The child only tilted their head as if unsure themselves. Then they whispered something in their strange tongue. The only word James understood was again the same: protector. Hours passed and James kept the children hidden, but his mind was not at peace through the thin walls. He heard cars outside, doors closing, heavy boots on the ground. He peeked through the curtain and froze. A black van was parked across the street. Two men in dark coats walked slowly, scanning the area. One of them held a strange device that beeped faintly. James' blood turned cold. He rushed back to the children, whispering, "You can't make noise, do you understand?" The children looked confused but stayed close to him. The younger one began to tremble, small glowing tears forming in their eyes. James hugged them tightly, trying to quiet their fear. Outside, the men walked past his building, their eyes sharp. One of them stopped, pointing the device toward James's apartment. It beeped louder and the man frowned. James held his breath, praying they would move on. Finally, after a long, tense moment, the men walked away. The van driving slowly down the street. James collapsed into a chair, sweat dripping down his face. "What have I gotten myself into?" he muttered. He looked at the children, who now huddled together on the couch, staring at him with those star-filled eyes. They were afraid, but they trusted him, and somehow, that trust was heavier than fear. Later that night, the older child walked to the window. They touched the glass with glowing fingers. A map of stars appeared faintly, shining against the window pane. James stared, unable to believe what he saw. Planets, galaxies, constellations, things no human could draw so perfectly. The child turned to him and whispered, "Home," then pointed at the stars and whispered again, "Gone." James felt his chest tighten. He understood enough: their home was lost, destroyed, or taken. The children lay down on the couch, curling together like two lost kittens. James covered them with a blanket, still unsure of everything. Why were they here? Why did they choose him? He sat awake in the dark, his mind a storm. The sound of the van's engine still echoed in his ears. He knew the men would come back, and next time, they would not leave so easily. As the clock ticked past midnight, James whispered to himself. "They're just kids," he said, his voice low. "They need me, and I can't let anyone take them." For years he had lived with nothing, a man forgotten by the world, but now, in one strange night, he had found something worth fighting for. He looked at the glowing shapes of the two alien children sleeping peacefully, and deep inside James felt the first spark of courage. A spark that told him his life was no longer ordinary. A spark that whispered, this was only the beginning of a much darker journey. The next morning, James woke to the sound of silence. The children were still asleep on the couch, their glowing skin dimmed as if their bodies tried to hide the light. For a moment, James thought it was a dream, that everything from last night was only in his imagination. But then the older child stirred, whispering in that strange language, and the younger one reached for his hand. No, it was real, too real, and now there was no turning back. James made a quick plan, if he could even call it that. He packed some food, some clothes, and a little money. The black van from last night haunted his thoughts. If those men returned, the children would be taken, and he knew in his heart they would not survive. He whispered to himself, "We have to leave. Now." He dressed the children in his old hoodies to hide their glowing skin. Their small faces peeked from under the hoods, their star-like eyes hidden behind shadows. They looked like any lost children, if someone did not look too closely. James led them outside, trying to stay calm, but his heart pounded with every step. The morning sun felt weak, and the city streets felt colder than usual. They reached his old car, a rusty machine that coughed before starting. James drove slowly at first, then faster as his fear grew. Every mirror, every reflection. He checked again and again. Was someone following them? Was the black van behind the corner? The children sat silently, holding hands in the back seat. The younger one's eyes shimmered with fear. While the older one tried to look brave, hours passed, and James drove out of the city toward the countryside. He thought maybe they could hide in some abandoned place, at least for a while. But then as the road curved through empty fields, a sharp noise cut through the air. James looked up and froze. Strange machines hovered above, small black drones with red eyes blinking. They moved like predators. Scanning the ground below, the children gasped. Pressing against each other, one of the drones turned and swooped low, its red light flashing on James's car. "Hold on," James shouted, stepping hard on the gas. The car roared, racing down the cracked road. The drone followed, its mechanical wings slicing the air. It made a screeching noise, a warning, or maybe a signal to others. James swerved into a dirt path leading to an old barn. The car bounced, dust flying everywhere, the children clutching the seats tightly. He stopped the car behind the broken building and pulled them out. "Inside, quick," he whispered, dragging them through the wooden doors. The barn smelled of dust and rust, but it gave cover. James peeked through the cracks and saw the drones circling above. Searching, he grabbed a metal rod from the ground. His only weapon, his mind screamed. He was just a normal man. Not a soldier, not a hero. But when he looked at the children, trembling and clutching his sleeve, he felt a fire rise inside him. He whispered, "No one is taking you." The older child stepped forward and opened a small pouch tied to their torn clothes. Inside was a strange device no bigger than a stone, glowing weakly. The child pressed it, and for a moment a blue field shimmered around them like a bubble. The drone outside shot a beam of red light, but the shield absorbed it, crackling with sparks. The children cried out as if the energy hurt them, and the shield flickered, fading quickly. James realized the device was failing. If the drones kept firing, it would break, and then nothing would protect them. He clenched the metal rod and ran outside, yelling to draw the machines away. "Over here," he shouted, swinging the rod wildly. The nearest drone turned toward him, charging with a loud screech. James ducked as the red beam burned into the dirt where he had stood. He swung hard, smashing the rod against the machine's wing. It sparked and spun out of control, crashing into the ground. But more drones swooped down, their red eyes glowing like fire. James ran back into the barn. Slamming the door shut, he breathed hard, sweat dripping down his face. The children clung to him, their glowing hands trembling. The younger one whispered, "Protector," again and again, tears shining in their eyes. The older child pressed the failing device, and James saw fear in their starry gaze. The device flickered, showing only a tiny spark of blue before going dark. It was dead outside. The drones circled, calling to each other in metallic voices. James felt the walls closing in, the barn too small, the world too dangerous. He knelt before the children, his voice firm. "Who are you, really?" The older child's lips trembled, their voice almost too soft to hear. "We are not safe anywhere on this world." The words chilled James to his bones. The children were not just lost, not just refugees, they were hunted. And whoever hunted them had already found the trail. James tightened his grip on the metal rod. He had no idea what tomorrow would bring, but he knew one thing: he would not let them be taken. Not while he still had breath in his body. The barn was cold and silent, dust falling through broken holes in the roof. James sat against the wooden wall. The children curled beside him, their glowing skin hidden under his jacket. His arms ached from swinging the metal rod. His body trembled from fear and exhaustion. But what shook him most was the truth whispered by the older child. "We are not safe anywhere on this world." James stared at them, wondering what fate had pushed them into his path. For years he had walked the streets alone, feeding stray dogs to feel less invisible. Now in only 2 nights, he had become the guardian of 2 alien children, hunted by enemies far stronger than him. It made no sense, but somehow it also felt right, as if destiny had chosen him without asking. The younger child stirred, small glowing tears shining in the dark. James gently wiped them away with his sleeve, whispering, "It's okay, I'm here." The child pressed closer, curling against his chest like a lost kitten. The older one watched quietly, their eyes filled with stars, but also with something new: trust. When morning light slipped into the barn, James searched the old shelves for supplies. He found a rusted lantern, some ropes, and a half-empty water bottle. Not much, but enough for the day. The children followed him, their small steps soft on the dusty floor. They did not ask questions, they simply stayed near, as if distance meant danger. At noon, James tried to make them laugh. He pulled funny faces, juggled apples from his bag, and even pretended to bark like the stray dogs. The younger child giggled for the first time, the sound light and musical. The older one smiled faintly. Though their eyes still carried a heavy sadness, James felt warmth spread in his chest, a feeling he had not known in years. It was not pity. It was care. It was family. Later, when they rested, the children showed him more of their strange abilities. The older one touched the barn wall and glowing lines spread across the wood like veins of light. Symbols appeared, patterns James could not read but felt were important. The younger child reached for his hand and suddenly he saw flickers of memory. A planet with silver skies, towers that reached into clouds. Laughter of parents now gone, James gasped and pulled back. His heart racing, the child only whispered, "Home," before tears filled their eyes again. That night James lit the lantern and spoke softly. "I don't know why you chose me, why you call me protector," he said, "but I swear I'll keep you safe as long as I'm alive." The children leaned against him, and for the first time he felt the bond tighten, not forced, not accidental. It was real, like an invisible thread between them. But peace did not last long. Through the cracks of the barn, James saw headlights in the distance moving slowly, searching. The sound of engines rolled across the fields. More black vans, more men, their shadows stretching across the night. James's chest tightened, his breath shallow. "They found us again," he whispered. He packed quickly, urging the children to stay silent. They left through the back, moving across tall grass under the pale moon. The children held his hands, their glowing skin hidden but their fear impossible to hide. The sound of radios crackled in the distance, men giving orders, dogs barking. James's heart pounded. If the children were caught, it would be the end. They reached a small forest, branches scratching his arms as they pushed through. The children struggled, their legs tired, but James carried the younger one without complaint. Every step felt heavy, every noise behind them like a hunter's breath. At last they found a hollow under fallen trees, a place to rest for a moment. James set the children down and tried to catch his breath. His body screamed with exhaustion, but he could not stop, not now. The older child placed a glowing hand on his arm. Warmth spread through him, easing the pain, calming the fear. James looked at them in shock, but the child only whispered, "Protector." He understood. This was their way of giving strength, their way of saying thank you. Tears stung his eyes, though he tried to hide them. He had never been anyone's hero, never even been noticed by the world. But to them he was everything. By dawn, the vans had left the fields, the search moving farther away. James sat with the children as the sun rose. Painting the sky with gold, he looked at their tired faces, at the bond growing stronger between them. He whispered, "Maybe I can't save the world, but I can save you." The children leaned against him, one whispering "Father" in a trembling voice. James froze, his heart breaking and healing at the same time. He hugged them close, tears slipping down his cheeks. For the first time in his life, he felt like he truly belonged to someone. And though danger surrounded them, though hunters would come again, he knew he would never let go. The sun was fading when James and the children reached the edge of the forest. They had been walking for hours, hiding from every sound, every moving shadow. James was tired, but he kept going. Pushing his body beyond its limits, the children stayed close, their glowing skin hidden under his jacket, their hands gripping his tightly. He thought maybe they were finally safe, at least for a while, but then the sky changed. Dark clouds rolled across the horizon, but they were not clouds at all. They moved too fast, too sharp, too controlled. James stopped and stared upward, his heart sinking. Strange lights flickered in the sky, red and silver beams dancing like predators hunting in the dark. The children froze, fear flashing in their star-filled eyes. The older one whispered a word James could not understand, but the sound was full of terror. The lights grew larger and soon ships appeared above. They were not human machines, sleek black bodies shaped like blades glowing with deadly power. James' stomach twisted, his mind screaming, "This is not the government. This is something worse." The children grabbed his arms, their bodies trembling. "They," the older one whispered in broken English, "they kill our parents." The words stabbed into James like knives. These were the hunters, the true monsters that had destroyed their home. And now they had come here, the ships descended, their engines roaring like thunder. The ground shook as beams of light scanned the forest, burning through trees like fire. James pulled the children behind a rock. Pressing them close, he whispered, "Stay quiet. Don't move." Though he knew it would not be enough. One of the ships fired into a nearby village and flames rose into the night sky. Screams echoed, human screams, as people ran for their lives. James' chest tightened, innocent lives were being taken. All because of this hunt. The younger child began to cry, glowing tears slipping down their cheeks. The older one touched James's hand, whispering, "We fight together." James shook his head. "No, you're just kids," he said, his voice breaking. But then he saw something strange. Their glowing marks began to shine brighter. When they held each other's hands, the glow spread, forming a circle of light around them. A shield, like the one from the device. But stronger, more alive, James stared in shock. You can do this without the device?" The children nodded weakly, their small bodies shaking with the effort. The ships drew closer, soldiers in black armor leaping down with weapons that hissed like snakes. James grabbed a broken branch, the only weapon he could find. He knew it was useless against such power, but he refused to stand still. The children's shield flickered, protecting them as beams of red energy struck. Sparks flew, the ground shook, and James felt the heat of battle all around him. He swung the branch at one soldier, surprising the creature enough to knock it back. It roared, not human, its voice sharp and metallic. James shouted, "You want them?" "You'll have to go through me." The fight was chaos. The shield held for moments, then flickered, then returned again as the children poured their energy into it. James fought like a wild animal, using rocks, sticks, and even his fists. Every strike was fueled by rage, every move by desperation. He was no soldier, but love gave him strength. Then a blast struck near him, throwing James across the ground. Pain tore through his body, and for a moment, the world spun in silence. The children screamed his name, their small voices sharp with terror. They ran to him, holding his hands, glowing brighter than ever before. James coughed, trying to rise, but his legs felt weak. The older child looked into his eyes and whispered, "Protect her. Don't leave." The shield around them flared, blinding white light spreading through the battlefield. The alien soldiers stumbled, their weapons failing against the sudden energy. The ships above pulled back for a moment, as if surprised. James felt warmth flood his body where their glowing hands touched him. The pain eased, his strength returned. It was not just a shield, it was healing, it was life. The children had awakened something greater inside themselves, but their small bodies could not hold it for long. The younger one collapsed, the light dimming. The older child held on, trembling, their voice breaking as they whispered, "Father, save us." James pulled them both close, his heart breaking. Above them, the ship circled again, preparing for another strike. He knew this was not the end of the fight. This was only the beginning of a war. Smoke still rose from the burning village. James carried the younger child in his arms while the older one walked beside him, their glowing skin hidden but their fear impossible to hide. They had survived the first attack, but James knew the hunters would return. Stronger, more ruthless, his body ached from wounds. His mind screamed with exhaustion, but he refused to stop. He was their protector, their father now. Whether the universe liked it or not, by dawn, they reached the edge of another town. James hesitated, knowing it was dangerous to enter, but the children needed food, shelter, and rest. He covered their heads with hoods and led them into the small streets. People stared at the stranger with two frightened children, but no one asked questions. James found an old barn at the far end of town and hid them there. Then he went out to find supplies. At the market, whispers filled the air. Strangers spoke of strange lights in the sky, of soldiers not from Earth, of government warnings. Some said monsters had come. Others said it was all lies. James kept his head low, buying bread, water, and blankets, but then he froze. Two men in dark suits were showing photographs to the crowd. One of the pictures was of him, another of the children. The caption read, "Dangerous fugitives, report at once." James's blood turned cold. It was not only the alien hunters chasing them, it was also humans. His own people wanted to take the children, to use them as experiments. He clenched his fists, rage burning inside him. He would not let anyone, alien or human, hurt them. That night, soldiers entered the town, searching house by house. James returned to the barn and told the children, "We can't hide forever." The older one placed a glowing hand on his chest and whispered, "Fight." James shook his head. "I'm just one man." But then he thought of the villagers running from the flames, of innocent people caught in this war, and he realized something. He was not alone. Humans were not helpless. If they stood together, they could fight back. The next morning, James went to the village square. He climbed onto a cart and shouted to the crowd, his voice raw and desperate. "Listen to me. The stories are true. They are here. They are hunting children, not monsters. Not weapons, children," the people muttered. Confused, afraid, James raised his voice. "If we hand them over, we are no better than the monsters in the sky. We have a choice, to prove we are human, to protect the innocent." At first, silence, then an old man stepped forward. "My son was killed last night by those ships," he said, tears in his eyes. "Tell me what I must do." Then a woman spoke. "If they are children, we cannot let them suffer." More voices joined, anger and courage growing. The villagers were afraid, but they were also human, and humanity had always found strength when protecting family. James led them back to the barn where the children waited. The villagers gasped when they saw the glow, the star-filled eyes, the strange marks, but instead of fear they felt pity. "They are only little ones," someone whispered. The older child looked at James, confusion in their gaze. James nodded. "These people will help us," he said softly. The bond of trust widened, no longer just between James and the children, but between them and all of humanity. That night, when the ships returned, the town was ready. Men and women armed themselves with rifles, fire, and even farm tools. James stood in front, holding his rod like a soldier holds a sword. The children stayed behind, their glow hidden, their eyes wide with fear but also hope. The ships descended, hunters leaping down with their deadly weapons. The government vans arrived too, soldiers shouting orders, pointing guns at both the aliens and the humans. For a moment it seemed the town would break apart. But then James shouted, "Stand together!" And the crowd roared in answer. The battle began. Bullets flew. Beams of red energy cut through the night. Fire lit the streets. James fought side by side with farmers, mothers, and young men. Every swing of his rod was filled with fury, every shout filled with love for the children behind him. The hunters were strong, but the humans were many, and they fought not for power but for family still. The fight was brutal. James was struck down, pain tearing through his chest, the world blurred, and he felt the ground cold beneath him. The children screamed, running to his side. Their glowing hands pressed against him, pouring energy into his broken body. Warmth spread. The pain faded, and James opened his eyes. They had saved him again. But their small bodies trembled, weak from the effort. He rose. Standing tall despite his wounds, his voice thundered across the battlefield. "We are human. We protect the innocent. We will not bow to monsters." The villagers cheered, their courage blazing even as fire rained from the sky. They did not step back for the first time. Humanity stood against both alien hunters and their own corrupt leaders, and at the heart of it all stood James, the man who once only fed stray dogs, now the father of 2 alien children. The fight was far from over, but a new truth was born. This was no longer just survival. This was a stand. The night was fire and chaos. The town burned. The sky thundered with alien ships, and the ground shook with the roar of human voices. James stood in the center of the fight, his body aching, his hands bleeding, but his spirit unbroken. The 2 alien children stayed behind him, their glow brighter than ever, their small faces filled with fear and courage. The hunters pressed harder, their soldiers pouring into the streets, weapons cutting through walls and fire. The government forces shouted orders, trying to capture both the villagers and the children, but the people refused to bow. They fought with whatever they had. Spades, rifles, torches, even stones. They shouted James's words. "We protect the innocent," as if it was a battle cry. James swung his rod with all his strength, knocking back a soldier in black armor. Another beam struck the ground near him, but he rolled away, dirt burning under his skin. He had no training, no armor, no weapon fit for war. But he had something stronger. Love. Behind him, the children joined hands, their glowing marks bursting with light. A wave of energy spread across the battlefield, pushing hunters back, breaking their machines. The villagers gasped, their fear turning into awe. The children were not weapons, not monsters, they were life itself. Pure and powerful, but the effort weakened them. Their small bodies shaking, their eyes dimming, James ran to them, kneeling as beams tore across the sky. "Stay with me," he begged, his voice breaking. The older child touched his face, whispering, "Father, don't give up." Tears filled James's eyes, but he nodded, rising again to face the storm. The hunters regrouped, their leader stepping forward, taller than the rest. Its armor glowed black and silver, its voice deep and sharp like iron breaking. "Give them," it demanded. Pointing its blade at the children, James stood firm, his body trembling but his voice strong. "They are mine now, they are family. You'll never take them," the creature roared, charging at him. James raised his rod, ready to die if it meant one more moment for the children. But before the strike landed, the villagers surged, blocking the leader. Men and women surrounded the monster, shouting, striking, refusing to step aside. Human courage filled the night. For the first time, the hunters hesitated. They had faced armies before, but never people who fought not for conquest, but for love. The battle raged until dawn. When the first light touched the burning streets, the hunters pulled back, their ships lifting into the sky. The government soldiers too retreated, broken by the resistance they had never expected. The town was scarred, homes destroyed, lives lost, but the people still stood, and so did James. He fell to his knees, exhausted. His hands shaking, the children rushed to him, their glow weak but their eyes full of relief. They held him tightly, whispering, "Protector, Father, safe." James closed his eyes, hugging them back. He had nothing left to give, but he had won. Not with weapons, not with power, but with the simple choice to stand. The villagers gathered, watching the strange children with gentle eyes. They no longer saw aliens, they saw orphans. Part of their family now. One woman stepped forward, placing a hand on James's shoulder. "You're not alone," she said. "We'll help protect them too." For the first time, James felt humanity itself standing with him. But as the smoke cleared, the sky changed again. This time new ships appeared, not black and sharp like hunters, but silver and bright. They moved with grace. Shining like falling stars, the children gasped, their eyes wide. Their glow returning. "Home," they whispered together, their voices trembling with joy. The ships descended slowly, peaceful, not threatening. James felt the children pull at his hands, pointing upward with hope. Their people had come at last. The silver ships landed beyond the hills, their doors opening, figures stepping out. Tall beings with the same glowing marks, the same star-filled eyes. The children cried out, running forward, but then they stopped, looking back at James. Their small voices broke as they whispered, "Father." James's chest tightened, tears streaming down his face. He had saved them, but he did not want to let them go. The alien beings approached, bowing their heads to James in silent respect. One of them spoke, their voice calm and deep. "You protected our children at the cost of your own life. Your people stood with them, with us. Humanity has proven itself." James shook his head. "I didn't do it for proof. I did it because they're family." The being smiled faintly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "That is why they chose you." The children hugged him tightly one last time, whispering, "Protector, Father, forever," James whispered back. "Forever," his voice breaking. Then they walked toward the silver light, their small glowing figures framed by the rising sun. James watched them go, his heart heavy but proud. He knew this was not an end but a beginning, for he had shown the truth, that humans could rise, that humans could protect, that humans were worthy. As the ships lifted into the sky, the villagers stood in silence. James whispered to himself, "Feeding stray dogs brought me here. Maybe it was always meant to be." The world was no longer ordinary, and neither was he. Humanity had answered, and the universe would remember.